Okay, thanks for tuning in. And we're kind of heading to a lunar eclipse. We just crossed the solar eclipse, even though it was not visible in India. It was a total solar eclipse, and it was visible in other parts of the world, probably the western part of the world. So this is kind of visible in India, and I thought we would just touch upon this topic. And today, Parvathy from USA has joined me to talk about the lunar eclipse, and you've been doing some of the videos on your Facebook live, and I saw your total solar eclipse video, and it was quite interesting. So I thought I would just invite you on my channel to talk about the lunar eclipse. So thank you so much for joining, and I'm sure this is going to be a good interesting discussion, because I thought you have some interesting perspectives to talk about.
Thank you very much, Ashwinji, for inviting me. I feel really honored, namaste, to be here. And yeah, this lunar eclipse coming up, I'd be happy to share my perspectives. So thank you for inviting me on your channel.
Thank you. So, so as it is before, since this is the first time, so would you like to just talk about some of your, how you entered astrology for
Sure. So my grandfather on my father's side was Jyotish. So I've grown up sort of with Jyotish being part of my awareness. And then living in the States, I first got into astrology at quite a young age. I mean, I was always surrounded by it with my grandfather, but my grandfather lived in India. So being in the States, I started to delve into Western astrology. And just like in our culture, whenever there's anything going on, if there's a marriage or a childbirth or any sort of auspicious event, we always check with the Jyotishis, and the accuracy and the ability to pinpoint things just over the span of my life is just so accurate, that with the Western, I believe in both schools, by the way, but with the Western astrology, you can read it and you can have a certain perspective. But I think for predictive and also for just like being able to look like on so many other levels, the Jyotish was just so compelling. And I decided several years back to undertake a more serious study of Jyotish. Prior to that, I had been practicing Ayurveda as well, which is interesting because my maternal grandfather was a Vaidya. So I'm at the moment still, always a perpetual student of both great sciences. And at one point, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into the medical astrology aspect and merge both the Ayurveda and the Jyotish together. So that's just a little bit of background on me. Thank you.
So that's interesting. Anyway, Ayurveda and astrology always makes a very good combination.
Yes.
And it has more. It also has, a good amount of potential to kind of help or serve humanity. So jumping into our own discussion topic today. So the lunar eclipse is happening on July 16th, and it's happening in the Gemini Sagittarius axis. Punarvasu in Gemini, and Uttarashada in Sagittarius. So, I mean, we just kind of crossed the solar eclipse, which was demanding from both physical and mental point of view, and it almost appeared as if it was kind of an aftermath of the Saturn-Mars opposition that we just had. So, with Sun already kind of in the nodal axis, there is a lot of tension that is going around. The nervousness between various things in our own day-to-day lives has been building up to the solar eclipse. And as we have just passed the solar eclipse, lunar eclipse is awaiting at the other door, like in Sagittarius. And it's an interesting phenomenon, and I think it is a nice cycle that kind of indicates something not at an individual level,
Mm-hmm.
or not necessarily at an individual level, but on a larger scale, from a mundane perspective, I think this has something to say. Um, Something to say very phenomenal, because this is just happening ahead of the great conjunction, that is the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, that's going to take place sometime in September or October, as
Yes.
Jupiter will enter Sagittarius. That is one of the greatest moments and greatest turning points in the cycles of the world, and the next 20-year cycle of Jupiter Saturn is about to begin. So, and just before this, like before 3 or 4 months, we have a series of eclipses, like solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. And this lunar eclipse, as I just pointed, this kind of gives an indication or a signal to something that is kind of that kind of has a lasting impact for a greater number of years. Because while talking about eclipses, it is very less, or I don't want to say less interesting, but it is much more interesting to talk about the mundane perspective of the world, in terms of the how an eclipse is going to trigger a specific social revolution, or a religious revolution, or something that is actually going to bring about a change, or some kind of um, alteration in terms of how society is functioning, and which will have a direct impact on humanity for various number of years. So I think this is a very interesting perspective, and let's talk about some of the very interesting points of what this eclipse has to offer, and let it be individual or mundane level. Let's take this discussion at an organic, let it be organic, and we'll see how this kind of leads to us. So I think you can just take over, and like, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Ashwinji. Actually, I feel very much the same way as you. And this axis of Gemini Sagittarius, in my last video that I've done, I've just been doing Facebook videos. So this is my first YouTube presence. I spoke a little bit about the cycle of Rahu and Ketu, and the 18-year cycle, and how 18 years ago it did change the face of the world stage, with the tragedy and the crisis of 9/11 happening along the same axis. So again, I don't want to put any fear out there, but it's quite a potent axis that we're dealing with here. And just shortly after the eclipse, the solar eclipse, we've seen a lot, at least here, there's been a few not major, but pretty sizable earthquakes that happened in Los Angeles just a few days ago. The day of the eclipse, there was quite a freak storm. I don't know if you saw that in Mexico,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
there was crazy hail, and with the nakshatra of Ardhara being, one of the symbologies of it being the storm, right? It's just interesting to see how it's already so quickly manifesting itself. Now with the lunar eclipse coming up here on the 16th in the nakshatra of Uttarashad, one of the significations, in fact, if not the signification of Uttarashad, is the latter victory, or like actually the final victory, which means it has a lasting effect, right? It's not just a temporary victory, it is the victory. So the lord of this nakshatra, being the sun, signifies our soul, and also our light, the light of our awareness. And with the moon, the manas, the mind, being eclipsed in that area with Rahu and with Ketu, I'm sorry, not with Rahu. The energy, I find, even though, with the nodes, it can be confusing, and it can be a little bit malefic in a sense. I feel that with this lunar eclipse, it's going to be quite beneficial. The deity of the Uttarashad, it is Ganeshaji himself. And Ketu embodies that energy of Sri Ganesha,
Sure.
right? So there might be the energy or the ability to really overcome whatever it is that's been mentally or emotionally sort of holding us back. You know, I find that the Rahu energy is a little bit different from Ketu's energy, in that Rahu, being the head, is constantly, you know, like desiring more and more and more. He's never satisfied. Whereas Ketu's satisfied already. In fact, it's more, go ahead.
No, I just meant to say that Ketu wants to kind of leave something behind and go.
Yes. He's like, enough, you know, bus. So, you know, there might be strong endings and there might be strong disillusions, but in Uttarashad, it is the victory of what? It's the victory of the luminaries, right? It's the sun, it's the king, it's the highest. Without the sun, where would we be? Sure. So it is the ultimate, right, overcoming of those things. And so I feel like with this eclipse, Ketu is actually assisting us in being able to, in a way, cut off those things, those extraneous things, whatever they may be. And depending on where it is in the chart, it will indicate like what realm these sort of endings will be. And it's up to us to just mentally know that once these things are gone, that it will only help to fortify us in our both our spirit, our soul, and also in our minds. You know, it'll help to refocus us in a higher, newer direction. Being that it's in Sagittarius, you know, the sign of the higher knowledge as well, and also the religious institutions, I do agree that perhaps it will usher in some sort of a shift in consciousness, or some sort of opening, perhaps, to allow, because if you have something full, then how can you add anything, right, into it? Yeah. So hopefully with the help of Ketu and the ability to let go and let go of what's not necessary, our ability to receive new insights will you know, enable us, right, to like facilitate a shift.
And whatever you say is kind of whatever you say in terms of facilitating us to receive the new things in is kind of signified from the other axis as well, because sun is exactly in the opposition, and sun throws vision in terms of helping us to kind of visualize what lies ahead or what lies near us in terms of
beautiful.
I mean, accepting things. And with Mars and Rahu already in Mars is not there, but Venus is in Gemini, and and Mercury is in Cancer. So there is a lot of emotions that is attached with this lunar eclipse, because I just want to throw some light on the Gemini axis as well, because I mean, I mean the other side of this axis, which is Gemini. So there is a lot of emotional quotient that is involved with Mercury being in Cancer, and Mercury doesn't really like being in Cancer, and Mercury
will be retrograde as well.
Yeah, Mercury will be retrograde in another like basically 23 hours or so. So which kind of Mercury stations retrograde, and that's even more powerful.
Yes.
And things are kind of I mean, well paced, and things are already set into motion, that is kind of leading us to the lunar eclipse, where we are kind of forced to kind of accept something.
Exactly.
It's not necessary that we really like it, or it is not good. I mean, it is really comfortable for us initially, to accept, but still in long run, I think it surely signifies something very important in our lives, or surely very important to the society. So so to move on to the moving on to the mundane perspective, as I already said, there is certainly going to be some kind of initial ideologies that are probably going to take shape,
Mm-hmm.
because Uttarashada is again the nakshatra of the actual victory, and
Yes.
things are already done. So we I mean the stage has already been set, and we just have to kind of take the stage, and we have to express ourselves. So in terms of whatever is going to take place in the society, decisions have already been made, but the implementation stage will probably be beginning as the eclipse is. I mean, during the eclipse or sometime around the eclipse. So and politically a lot of important things might happen, and just surrounding the eclipse, the solar eclipse, the interesting political agreement, I mean the political news that involved Trump and the North Korean, uh, yeah, so that is I mean stuff like this kind of keeps happening, and unexpected things on a political level, societal level, religious level, and philosophical level keeps unfolding, and each day some kind of news. I mean, we wake up to some kind of some kind of news or a breaking news, whatever it may be, which kind of uh, forces us to read. I mean, what's going on in the society, or what's going on in various parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the mundane perspective is actually even more significant, with Uttarashada signifying victory. On the other axis, I mean, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Punarvashu, which is again signifying the repeating patterns. So,
Yes.
so things that, and Mercury retrograde also signifies redoing or reassessing things. So this is not necessarily a period of action, because Sun is placed along with Rahu, and whenever Sun is placed along with Rahu, or when Sun is in opposition to Saturn, or when Sun kind of forms some form of an aspect with Mars, we really don't want to engage in some kind of action or a specific kind of action. There are things that you can do when Sun forms an aspect with Mars, but still, when Sun is opposing Saturn, there is a lot of ideology clash that always happens. And
Mm-hmm.
the good thing is Sun is overcoming Saturn in this case, and things are much more better. But the thing is, again, I really don't suggest any action for this time, especially with Mars debilitated and Mercury going retrograde. It's good to kind of review and reassess, because the entire theme of this eclipse is all about, uh, as I already said, the stage is already set, but we just have
Mm-hmm.
to see if everything is set up in the right manner or not, to kind of release the bow at the final moment.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I do believe at the end of it, it comes down to the quality of one's consciousness. Like we could talk about the gunas a little bit, just to bring some a little bit of elements of Ayurveda in here. We've got the tamasic, rajasic, and the sattvic, so it depends on the condition of one's mind. Because also with Ketu, if we look at the symbology of Ketu is headless.
Mhm.
So if one, and it's also tamasic graha, right? So if one's mental nature or state, current state, is that of tamas, you can expect certain people to behave, even though, with us as astrologers being able to understand, okay, maybe now's not the time to act, and usually during eclipses it's not, but other people out there may not be aware of it, and if they're operating from a tamasic or a heavier mental state, then they may act in a headless way. This is something to be aware of. The energies can impact them to where they make grave mistakes, actually. And these mistakes coming from a place of tamas or unconsciousness can have lasting implications, um, you know, on a mundane level as well as a personal level.
Sure.
So yes, I think it really, really depends on the individuals and the collective sort of vibes or energies, and what level, what quality of consciousness and awareness is the action coming from. Either way, it will have a lasting impact, especially like with the being done under the nakshatra of Uttarashada.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree. Politically, wow, I can't even begin to think about like what could happen. It's like every single day, it's one surprise after the next. So
Yeah, I mean,
so
yeah, and Venus is also combust, and
yes,
I've learned in my studies that Venus is a very important planet when it comes to politics and society, but people always overlook Venus when it comes to politics and society. But with Venus combust, there is a lot of societal and political stuff that might actually unfold
yes.
at a very secret manner because Venus is combust by Sun. So
And it's with Rahu. It's very tight, during
yes,
this.
yeah. So and Rahu is the planet of politics. So there is
Mm,
something that is kind of unfolding at a political level, and global or international politics is getting super interesting. But a lot of things are lying underground, and things are very very secret because Venus is actually combust, and things are not going to come out unless and until Venus is going to actually show itself when it moves away from Sun, or as Sun progresses away from Venus and leaves Venus out of the combust zone. And talking about relationships, obviously, I don't think anyone would really want to marry when Venus is combust or Venus is part of an eclipse. So that is kind of. But on the other hand, um, for some people, things can be extremely positive, and it can actually indicate some beginnings or something like that. A solar eclipse would certainly indicate a beginning, but this is a lunar eclipse. Maybe there is a saturation or a maturity level of a specific relationship that kind of I mean a couple could attain a specific level of good maturity in their relationship because of lunar eclipse, because sun moon opposition is always all about saturation point, maturity, and
mm-hmm.
the topmost level, the pinnacle. So just before the midheaven, the opposition is the it's the pinnacle of whatever you want to achieve at a philosophical sense from a greater truth point of view. So yeah, I mean, we can just keep on talking about this at various levels. And on the other hand, talking about Sagittarius, Jupiter is not in a really good position to kind of help any planet that is placed in Sagittarius, as there is no reception that Jupiter can offer at this point of time. So it's a tricky place, or it's a tricky position of eclipse. And if you find yourself having this eclipse in the dushtanas of your horoscope, you might really want to check what's really going on. So I
And
mean,
also on the kendras as well, because that will affect those that, at least in sidereal Gemini, Sagittarius, and also to a certain extent Virgo and Pisces, because the kendras are our foundations.
so
So there might be a very pivotal shift happening in
exactly.
our.
Well
Mhm.
said. Well said. I like the word pivot being used with kendras.
Yes, and the foundations, and also with like with the eclipses, like it's very interesting because with Rahu Ketu, period, it's very interesting because you never know. To us on a certain level, we might be seeing it as okay, like shadowy energy or like cutting energy. But it depends on our personal horoscopes. Everything does, and like I have several friends that have Gemini rising, and right now with that Rahu energy being there, they're like really enjoying this time, that momentum and that energy, especially this last eclipse. Yeah, I check in with them and I'm like, how was the solar eclipse? You must have been hit really hard. And they're like, no, we're having a great time. So yeah, it certainly does depend. However, with these energies, there is always a touch of things that, like you said, unseen, or perhaps like a little bit, and I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to because I can't think of another word, a little bit tainted, and we may not realize it until later it'll reveal itself, like we make it an opportunity and we think, yeah, wow, it's a great opportunity, but it's not quite what we think it is. I agree with you in that with the full moons, usually, yes, it is the apex, it is like the point, the brightest point of illumination of our minds. Full moons indicate strong manas or awareness, but because Rahu and Ketu are involved, right? Like I said in my last video, what we think is not necessarily how things are. With the Venus and the Rahu together, it may indicate like some sort of obsession in couples, or perhaps some sort of seeing the other person in a way that's tainted or not clear. We may think, wow, this person's this, and this, but then we find out in 6 months' time, right? Exactly. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and that is kind of pretty much indicative about Venus's combustion at this point of time, because a lot of things are hidden,
yes,
and things kind of gets uncovered at a later period, maybe. And let's not attach a time frame to that, but
right,
kind of reasonably later period. And again, Mercury and Venus, personal planets, are not in best of their positions. So again, it takes time to realize, and the consciousness does not really realize things, especially when it is actually happening even in front of us. With sun and moon under the eclipse, we don't visualize things that, we don't care about things that even fall very close to us, or we tend to overlook a lot of things during this period. So as it is, it's a very interesting period, and let's just make sure that we are in line with what the cosmos have to offer during this period, and yeah, do whatever you like. And
I just wanted to add, the reason I put 6 months is usually, as far as my experience, and of course, like my experience is very, it's not, but I said 6 months because usually in between the two eclipses, we're going to have another eclipse in December. But I have heard people say that, like, depending on, and I don't have so much experience with this, so maybe you can enlighten me, but I've heard people say that depending on the number of minutes of the eclipse or the number of hours that with the lunar eclipse indicates that these effects can last for that many years. I can't speak with any authority on that, but I don't know.
No, the eclipse. There are various studies and various cycles of studying eclipse, such as Ceres cycles and so on. So, and those are all thousands of years. You can kind of read an eclipse and its effects for thousands of years.
Wow.
It just has patterns going on. So many people have done, especially Western astrologers, have done some amazing works in terms of reading the eclipses and studying the eclipses. So maybe, that could be an entire series of videos on eclipses. But still, to just, I don't know how to kind of begin and enlighten on this, but still, maybe I can just share a link to.
Sure.
If you want, I can just suggest Bernadette Brady is one of the most authoritative figures in terms of studying eclipses, and she has written a book, and she has done a lot of studies on eclipses. And I can share some of the links that I find to be very useful to study the cycles of eclipses. And Emma Current, an astrologer from Slovenia, has done some really good work with eclipses, and there is one video on my own channel where she talks about how to read eclipses at a mundane perspective. So,
oh, wonderful.
So yeah, I mean, I think people can just go on and check that video. She has also spoken about some of what might actually what we can expect during this eclipse, but that's from a tropical point of view. But it doesn't matter if it is tropical or sidereal. At the end of the day, we are just looking at the same point of view or the same point with different lens. So
Exactly. 100% agree. Yes.
so yeah, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the show. So before that, do you offer some readings or something?
I do actually. My web page is currently under construction, but you can visit there. It's visionaryveda.com. And also, I have a Facebook page with the same name, Visionary Veda, and an Instagram. So you can feel free to visit there. And I am doing consultations. Currently, I find a lot that when the eclipses are up, I get a lot of inquiries for consultations. So I am booked quite a ways out, but yeah, feel free to drop me an email. Also, my email is visionaryveda@gmail.com. And I wish everybody a very yes, a very good eclipse. And again, I think that the energy of this lunar eclipse is going to lean on the positive, just because of the quality of this nakshatra, and also the deities presiding over this nakshatra. And, with the Lord Ganesha being one of the ruling lords of this nakshatra, and also of the planet Ketu, I think that yeah, it's all for our evolution and our benefit. So yeah,
And
things are not always as they seem, but I think in the end it's going to be a very positive one, if I could say that.
sure, even I see this as a point of visualization of various hurdles that lies in front of us, and we can kind of break the shackles and move on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. Yes, I agree.
So, okay, okay, I think that's the end of this video, and
Thank you, Ashwinji. Yeah, for having me on. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate
thank
your
you,
yes. All right.
thank you, thank you.